Okay, without further ado, let's have a look at the post-maturity stage. So, what is this stage? This is when a business is experiencing a consistent decrease in sales or a reduced demand from the market. So, it's exactly following on from maturity. Maturity was all about having that plateau, sense of um, that sense of being at the top of the market in the industry that the business is operating in. In post maturity, it's not as stable as that, but there are the three different outcomes. So when you're in post maturity, you can continue up by renewing the business and then continuing on the trajectory upwards. We can also have a steady state where nothing really happens. And then we've got decline as well, where businesses are going to think about downsizing or closing completely because of, um, like we saw, reduced demand, reduced sales, those sorts of things. So let's have a look at these in more detail. So in the steady state, the business may consider themselves in the maturity stage. So we could see in that previous diagram that it was essentially just a flat line. So they may not even see themselves as being in post maturity. It's a bit of a gray area in terms of some of these distinctions. And so they may have experienced a slight decline when they're in the steady state, but the business is still remaining viable. And they may stop pursuing growth once they're satisfied with their objectives. So they're happy with that steady stage that they're in. They're not really looking to continue to grow because that would involve bringing in those renewal strategies that we'll look at shortly as well. So, attributes of the steady state. We've got maintaining day-to-day customs. We've got owner content with financial performance. So again, they're not looking at growing further. They don't want to get more customers, and of course, they're not going to bring in more employees either. And that also means that maybe if employees leave, if they're retiring or resigning to move on to other positions, maybe they won't be replaced. And since they are in a steady state, they may perceive any change to be negative because they want things to remain the same so they can remain in that steady state. So Woolworths and Coles would most likely not be considered post-mature businesses because they are still at the top of their industries. They're not really in that post-maturity phase. And the reason for that is they use those repositioning strategies to make sure they're constantly at the top of their game. And so that is helping them to make sure that they don't enter decline. And decline is where you're going to have a reduction in sales or demand for products and services. You may try to downsize by reducing employee numbers or not offering as many products or services. And it can be caused by lots of different factors, which we'll have a look at shortly as well. So when you're in decline, you're going to not have that steadiness in terms of revenue. So, of course, that means difficulty with meeting financial obligations. And again, that idea of not replacing departing employees, that can happen in the steady state and it can also happen in decline. And they're not going to probably look at so much marketing. If they're in decline, they are going to be looking at potentially exit strategies, depending on how sort of bad the decline is. So let's have a look at an example or two. So Revlon is a cosmetics company and it filed for bankruptcy in the US in June 2022. So that is an example of a strategy that a business is going to use to exit or the market. So when a company is not able to continue anymore, sometimes they are forced to file for bankruptcy. Another example is Target. So back in 2020, in the period of COVID, when that first came about, Wesfarmers, the parent company, announced that 75 Target stores would be closed and 92 would be converted into Kmart. And Kmart was doing far better at the time, so trying to appeal to consumers by going for what they were looking for. People wanted Kmart for the lower price point and that kind of thing. So they were responding to that market demand.